I want to talk about a non-sexy topic, but it's a topic that really affects a lot of us. And I actually think that personally, I've had a lot of experiences with it. I'm sure you have too, so it's not just me. But it's honestly, I think, one of the most devastating feelings, and it's a subjective experience. It's a subjective perception, and that is loneliness. And I say subjective experience because when you think about it, there's times when you could be with your family, let's say at Christmas time, surrounded by the ones you love in a really great environment, and you could feel utterly disconnected and extremely lonely. Now, if we flip that around, the opposite of loneliness would be this deep sense of connection. And you can be in a place where you're completely alone, walking down the beach, or even someone somewhere not sexy, maybe walking down the sidewalk alone on the street where no one's around, and you could feel this deep sense of connection to the things around you, the atmosphere. And so the point being is that it's loneliness is a subjective perception, which means it's a subjective experience, which luckily means that you can cultivate connection. And so I'll give you a little hint on kind of where we're going to go with this. I'm going to share some stories about some lonely experiences in my life that really you would think would be times that would be more deep connection. But there's a quote that I think says this nicely, and it's by, I think her name is Florence Scovel. I found it a couple years ago, and she says that the game of life is a game of boomerangs. Our thoughts, our deeds, our words, and actions, they'll return to us sooner or later with astounding accuracy. And so with this in mind, I'm going to get into a couple stories for you to illustrate this point. A few years ago, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, and I can honestly remember this being a really, really lonely time in my life. And I was under a lot of stress at work. I ended up deciding to take a sabbatical, which was great, one of the greatest things I've ever done. And if you're thinking about doing something like that, do it. But I was planning this trip to Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, India. And at the time I was dating a girl who was actually grew up in Vietnam, and so she was Vietnamese, but she was, here in America and an American. But I had this opportunity to go to Southeast Asia for the first time and not be attached to work, and also go with someone who had grown up in Asia, and Southeast Asia in particular. So I ended up going to Vietnam and having just the coolest experience. Basically riding scooters around in Saigon, meeting locals. And as I mentioned, my girlfriend grew up there, so I had the opportunity to actually really have a local experience at the restaurants, and it was really, really a cool experience. After I was done with Vietnam, my girlfriend and myself, my girlfriend at the time, we ended up going to Thailand, where we saw, kickboxing and all these cool things. And we actually got there. It was Songkran, which is actually like kind of their New Year's Day festival, and we didn't even know it was going on. And I remember getting shot as soon as we get out of a cab with a water gun, and that's sort of a blessing from the folks, the locals there. And so I'm having this really cool adventure, and it's probably about a month into the trip, and it's the time for my girlfriend to go home. And once my girlfriend went home, in my mind it was going to be having fun, but at the same time I wanted to start some online material and get that going. So work mixed with pleasure. And I ended up staying in Thailand, in Phuket, for a little bit on the beaches, which was cool. And shortly after, I ended up going to Bali, which was pretty interesting because I had rented a car in Thailand, and then when I got to Bali, I also rented a car. And so anyone that actually has been to Bali, you'd know that it's probably not the best place to rent a car. So that was absolutely hilarious, having a car and driving it a little bit around Bali. But a couple weeks went by, and I started to notice how I was feeling very disconnected, and this sense of loneliness was creeping up within me. And I actually remember talking to my girlfriend at the time and distinctly telling her how lonely I felt. And I actually went to a men's work group, and I ended up tearing and actually I think crying a little bit. And I didn't even know where these feelings were coming from, just feeling like utterly disconnected, even though I was doing some cool things like surfing, cliff jumping, going to some really cool spiritual places and doing really, really cool things. I started just to feel very, very alone. And I was voicing that. So I was telling people, hey, I am just super lonely and I'm here in a group of men who are also traveling the world, yet I'm feeling really lonely and feeling really disconnected. I'm on the phone talking to my girlfriend about the work that I'm doing, and I was telling her how disconnected I felt from the work. And just like I felt disconnected from everything, I was going to restaurants, not really connecting really well with the waitresses or the waiters. I was going to the gym. I think there was an F45 in Canggu, Bali that I was working at the time. But again, feeling very, very disconnected. And as I mentioned, loneliness is an absolutely subjective experience. Now, one morning in particular, I had a really good night's rest. And I remember getting up and doing my breath work. And I did a really long session of breath work. And I also did something new. I did this visualization, this meditation technique I hadn't done before. Looking back, I remember feeling really good that day, really good on the inside. So I went about my day and I did my work in the morning. As I mentioned, I was working on some side work, putting together a project. And so, of course, I got that done like usual. But later that evening, I went for a scooter ride. And I remember going for the scooter ride. I'm going along and I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling the wind against my face. The sun is going down and I'm seeing the rice fields. And I notice as I'm driving along over to the left, some young men playing soccer. And so I thought, oh, hey, let's watch some soccer. And so I take my scooter, drive it along, park it, and start watching the young men playing soccer. And they're playing and they're kicking the ball. And all of a sudden, the ball gets kicked over the fence and I catch it. And I remember having the ball in my hands and feeling, honestly, really blissful inside. And there really is no other word to describe it other than just connected. And I grabbed it and really kind of savoring that moment and threw it back to the young men, and the ball, fell in there. And all the young men, they stopped, and not all of them, but I would say like 4 or 5 of them, and they're yelling, and I don't know what they're saying, but they're kind of motioning me over. And what I realized were all these young men that are playing soccer are saying, hey, come on, play with me. And in that moment, I just remember literally thinking and actually saying out loud, like, man, I feel so connected. I feel so good. I feel in harmony. I feel blissful. And it was really an odd thing. And so in that moment, in that instance, that feeling of loneliness was gone. I felt deeply connected to the guys that were playing soccer. And the rest of the evening, I felt deeply connected. I remember going to get dinner, and I was very charismatic with the waiter, and the waiter was telling stories about how they ended up in Bali, doing their own soul-searching trip. And then later that next morning, I ended up going surfing and meeting someone in the water, and just randomly bumping into someone and just sharing a laughter and then sharing some stories. And it was really kind of what popped into my mind was, again, this sense of connection. And I couldn't help but think, what had changed? All those friendly people, all those young men playing soccer, the waitress, the waiter, the surfers in the ocean, the people at restaurants, they were always there and they were always ready to welcome me. But for some reason, my perception was fixated with loneliness and I couldn't see it. I couldn't see any of the connection. I didn't feel any of the connection. So the question then would be, what shifted? How did I go from feeling this deep sense of loneliness, and really loneliness, I can honestly say, is one of the worst emotions, the worst sensations we can actually feel. Not that it's an emotion, the worst lenses or the perception that we can have of the world, to going to this complete flip in this sense of connection. And I think the easiest thing to do would be, well, let's go back and so when life we have some data points, let's go back and look at what was going on that day that I felt connected, what shifted. And as I mentioned before with Florence Scovel, the quote from the beginning of the video, is that I really think that every thought we think, every word we speak, well, it goes out into the universe and then it ripples back to us into our awareness. And so it's like thinking of a stone. When you throw a stone into the pond, well, that actually ripples out, and eventually those ripples come back to the source. And so I had really been concentrating my thoughts and my perception on disconnection. I was telling people how disconnected I felt. My thoughts were of loneliness. Everything just felt viscerally lonely. And again, when we go back to the data points, well, the day I felt very connected and everything shifted, I had a great night's sleep. And so I think sleep is really important. But even more so was this meditation that I had done that morning. I did my breath work. I felt rested, and then I did this meditation, which is called the 6-phase meditation. I'm not in any way actually suggesting that you try that. You can if you want. I'm not affiliated with that. But what was really interesting was in that meditation, the very first part of it is to actually take your mind, and what's powerful when you do meditation and inner exercise is that you're taking your mind to quieter levels, and you're going from the surface level of the mind, which is really like a flashlight, to the deeper levels of your mind, which is really more like a laser. You're tapping into that place of infinite creative potential where all the laws of nature reside. And so I did my breath work, and then I went and did the meditation, the 6-phase meditation. And so I'm in a deeper place with my eyes closed, and actually in the first phase, visualizing this sense of connection, this sense of empathy and compassion. I think actually the first phase is about compassion, creating this bubble. And so first I'm feeling a sense of compassion for myself, a sense of connection to myself, a sense of connection to the source. And then I'm visualizing this compassion, this connection into my room, into the community in Bali. I'm visualizing it into the country, into the continent, into the world, and eventually literally viewing the world from a disconnected place. And this meditation was super powerful. So that was the first thing. Again, you want to look back into your life and see those data points. And the other thing was that I went for a scooter ride. And so what was interesting is this is an activity of joy. And I do believe that when we have activities that create joy, well, we actually have absence of thought. And so because I had absence of thought and I was riding around on a scooter doing something that I love, feeling the wind against my face, feeling the sunshine going down, and already feeling this deep sense of connection earlier from doing that meditation, well, I was experiencing really not a lot of thoughts. I was just in the moment and riding it. So when I arrived at the soccer field, well, that boomerang, that rock that I threw in the morning, that primer to prime my day, it rippled back. And so I was able to feel a sense of connection, and actually to literally in the 3D world have a sense of connection with the boy. You know, the boys saying, "Hey, come on over, let's play some soccer." And I think that's something to think about. And so really, when it comes to down to it, our thoughts are so incredibly positive, are so incredibly powerful, whether or not we feel connected or we feel lonely. And I think that it's super important to take time to focus on more of what we want. And so again, if I look at this, I would think that connection is really more about taking time every day. I'm not saying you have to do the 6-phase meditation, but taking time to connect with yourself, to go somewhere quiet, to close your eyes, whether it's prayer or whatever you want to do. For me, it's generally breath work and meditation, but also to have that deeper level of mind, having that sense of connection and priming the day so that when that ripple comes back, we're not getting a ripple back of loneliness, we're getting a ripple back of connection, because there is that interconnectedness, and therefore the representation that we're getting in the world is this interconnected representation that was always there. We just couldn't see and we couldn't experience it because ourselves, we were disconnected from that source and disconnected from that connection. So that's something we can do, again, is prime our day with something quiet and connecting with ourselves. And then on the outer world, the outer exercise we could do is to have a little bit more joy. What are those things that at the end of the day, we want to work really hard and we want to go after what the hell we want, but we also want to connect and have joy. And so for me, when I was in Bali, I connected in the morning with myself, and then I went out on the scooter ride, and I was absent of thoughts because our thoughts can be a pain in the ass, so to speak, for sure. And they can be our worst enemy or our greatest asset. And so I think that it's very important to do things that bring joy. So whether that is going surfing, going for a walk, or whatever that is, have that time for yourself so that you can feel a sense of connection. So again, the data points for me were good night's sleep, which I think is hard to do sometimes, obviously when the mind is busy. Taking time to prime myself in the morning so I feel a sense of connection, whether that's visualization, the 6-phase meditation, or whatever it is, making sure that I'm doing that. And then also having time every day where I'm doing something that brings me joy for the fact that I'm not in my mind and I'm actually playing football. So rather than thinking about playing football and thinking about giving that presentation, being in the moment and doing those things that bring us joy. And so as I say this, I'm going to go for a walk after this. I have to go, stay in the moment and be connected. But I hope that through this story, it planted a couple seeds in your mind. And keep in mind that words are just seeds. Go out there and get your own data points. And so see if this stuff works for you. Give it a try. Do that inner exercise to prime yourself and connect with yourself so that you can feel the more connection with the universe, and then go do some things that make you happy. What we call that in positive psychology would be intentional activities. So those things that bring us great joy and it can help us leave the thinking mind behind.